The difference between staying financially trapped forever and achieving real independence comes down to $25,000, a threshold most investors never cross, and current income has almost nothing to do with whether someone will make it. Wall Street doesn't want this conversation happening because it sounds too straightforward. They profit from complexity, from convincing people that wealth requires insider knowledge, elite connections, or a finance degree. But wealth is mathematics. Simple, cold arithmetic. And the numbers reveal that everything changes once you cross a specific capital threshold. Stanley Druckenmiller ran Decane Capital for 3 decades, posting 30% average annual returns without a single losing year. He managed George Soros's quantum fund. Together, they made $1 billion in a single day, shorting the British pound in 1992, a trade that broke the Bank of England. He navigated every major market cycle for 40 years, from Black Monday to the dot-com crash to the 2008 meltdown. But here's the part nobody mentions. In 2000, he lost $3 billion in 6 weeks. He knew better. He had publicly warned about the tech bubble for months. He was shorting overvalued internet stocks. He was right about the analysis, but he couldn't handle watching younger traders in his fund make money while he sat on the sidelines. His ego got involved. He abandoned his own principles and poured $6 billion into tech stocks at the peak. Within 6 weeks, half of it was gone. That catastrophic loss taught him something more valuable than any winning trade ever could. What separates people who build lasting wealth from those who stay broke isn't avoiding mistakes. It's understanding the fundamental math of capital accumulation and respecting the threshold where everything shifts. That threshold is $25,000. For anyone earning a regular paycheck, watching successful investors from a distance and wondering whether financial freedom is actually possible without advantages, pay close attention. Druckenmiller started with nothing special, no family money, no Ivy League pedigree. He dropped out of graduate school and took a junior analyst job at a Pittsburgh bank at 23. Most people misunderstand how wealth building actually works. The beginning is painfully, brutally slow. Someone saves a few $100s, and it sits in their account doing essentially nothing. They add more over months, and the pile grows at a rate that feels insulting. Meanwhile, everyone around them is spending freely, taking trips, buying new cars, living what appears to be better life. I start questioning whether they're the idiot. This is where 95% of people quit, right at the moment when it feels most pointless. They don't realize they're standing at the base of an exponential curve. The early section of that curve looks flat. It feels like nothing is happening. But the curve isn't flat, it's loading. And quitting now means never seeing what comes next. The actual arithmetic changes everything once understood. Suppose someone saves $600 a month, which totals $7,200 annually. After year one, with a modest 8% return, they have roughly $7,500 they sacrificed for 12 months. Packed lunches instead of eating out, skipped expensive weekends, drove their old car while friends bought new ones. And they have $7,500 to show for it. This is the breaking point. People look at that number and calculate how long wealth will take at this pace. They think linearly. If 1 year produces $70,500, they figure $100,000 will take 13 years. And $500,000 will take most of their working life. So why bother? This thinking is completely backwards. This exact miscalculation keeps more people poor than any economic system or unfair advantage anyone wants to blame. The math isn't linear, it's exponential. And the exponential part only reveals itself after crossing the threshold. $25,000 is where the transformation begins, not because there's anything magical about that specific number, but because of what happens psychologically and mathematically once someone reaches it. Psychologically, identity shifts. They're no longer someone who can accumulate capital. They have proof they can execute this plan. A meaningful cushion exists that changes how they sleep at night. Options appear that didn't exist before. They're no longer one emergency away from financial disaster. This mental shift is worth more than the money itself because it unlocks different behavior. Mathematically, capital starts generating visible returns. Even a conservative 8% return on $25,000 produces $2,000 annually without anyone touching it. That's not life-changing yet, but it's real and visible, and it compounds. Here's what people dramatically underestimate. Investment returns begin approaching, then matching, then eventually exceeding what they can't add through salary savings alone. With $5,000 saved, an 8% return generates $400. Barely noticeable. With $25,000 saved, that 8% return produces $2,000. That's nearly a third of what someone is saving annually from their paycheck. $50,000 in capital means returns hit $4,000. Now their money is pulling nearly as much weight as they are. $100,000 produces $8,000. Capital is working harder than most people work at their jobs. $250,000 produces $20,000. Money now earns more annually than the entire threshold that started everything. This is the hidden truth about wealth. The first stage requires almost entirely personal effort. Someone does all the work while their money contributes almost nothing. But a crossover point arrives where capital starts carrying more of the load. Then it carries most of the load. Then it carries all of it. Most people never reach this crossover because they quit during the hard part. They quit when their contribution is everything and their capital's contribution is nothing. They can't imagine how this slow grind could possibly turn into real wealth. But the math doesn't negotiate. The curve is exponential. The early part appears flat. The later part is steep. Nobody reaches the steep part without surviving the flat part. 3 psychological errors trap intelligent people in poverty. Understanding them might be worth more than any investment advice anyone will ever receive. The first error is impatience. Building real wealth requires massive amounts of delayed gratification. If that doesn't come naturally, someone needs to work incredibly hard to develop it. Most people simply cannot wait. They watch neighbors upgrading their lifestyle, and something breaks inside them. The fear of missing out becomes overwhelming, so they spend their seed capital to feel better today and guarantee poverty tomorrow. The arithmetic of patience is unforgiving. In early years, someone is saving $600 monthly, watching their account grow by small increments, while the entire world screams at them to spend. They're hit with thousands of advertisements daily. Coworkers discuss their new purchases. Social media shows carefully edited versions of lives they can't afford. The human brain interprets all this as falling behind. Sacrifice feels pointless. The thought creeps in that they should just enjoy life now, because tomorrow isn't promised anyway. This is where wealth building dies. Not from market crashes, not from bad stock picks. From the simple inability to delay gratification. The person who could have been wealthy at 50 is broke at 50 because they couldn't tolerate looking less successful than their neighbors at 30. Consider Mozart. One of history's greatest talents. His compositions were reperformed for centuries. And Mozart was miserable most of his life for one reason. He always spent more than he earned, regardless of how much he made. He died broke. Here was a man with once-in-a-century gifts, earning substantial income for his era. None of it mattered because the money left faster than it arrived. If Mozart couldn't escape this trap, what makes anyone think they can? The uncomfortable reality is that income level barely matters for wealth building. Tires go broke constantly because they scale spending to match or exceed their income. Someone earning $50,000 who saves $8,000 annually will end up wealthier than someone earning $250,000 who saves nothing. The arithmetic doesn't care about job titles. The second error is envy. Druckenmiller learns this, watching brilliant investors destroy themselves. The world isn't driven by greed. It's driven by envy. Someone can have a solid plan, be making real progress toward $25,000, and then they see someone else getting richer faster. Suddenly their plan feels inadequate. They start taking stupid risks to catch up, or spending money to prove they're not falling behind. They destroy their own progress, trying to match people who might be destroying themselves too. Envy is particularly dangerous because it attacks people who are actually succeeding. Nobody needs envy to ruin someone with no plan and no discipline. they'll fail anyway. Envy reserves its damage for those who are doing everything right until they looked sideways. The neighbor with the impressive car might be financing it at 19% interest. The colleague who bought the bigger house might be one layoff from foreclosure. The friend who appears to be getting rich quick might be about to lose everything. Nobody knows their real situation, but envy doesn't care about reality. It only sees the surface, and the surface is designed to deceive. Someone will always be getting richer faster. This isn't a tragedy. The tragedy is letting that fact derail progress toward $25,000. Envy is a stupid sin because it's the only one you get nothing from. Gluttony at least provides a good meal. Envy just leaves someone miserable about someone else's success while gaining nothing. Druckenmiller conquered envy decades ago. Nobody gets his envy anymore. He doesn't care what someone else has. This mental shift alone is worth millions over a lifetime. When people stop measuring themselves against others and start measuring against their own plan, their own timeline, the psychological pressure disappears. The third error is overtrading. Druckenmiller sees it constantly. People feel they need to do something. They can't just sit there while their capital compounds, so they buy and sell constantly, convinced they're being smart and active. What they're actually doing is paying fees, paying taxes, and interrupting the compounding process that would make them wealthy if they just sat still. At Duquesne, Druckenmiller's best years came from holding his highest conviction positions and doing almost nothing. The hardest thing in investing is sitting on your hands. Most people can't do it. They need action. They need to feel productive. That psychological need for activity keeps them poor. The first rule of compounding is never interrupt it unnecessarily. Every time someone sells a working investment, they pay taxes. Every time they pay taxes, they have less capital compounding. Simple arithmetic. But people keep getting it wrong because they cannot sit still. They confuse activity with productivity. Trading makes them feel like investors. Holding makes them feel like they're doing nothing. But doing nothing is exactly what builds wealth. Inversion is one of the most powerful tools for building wealth, and almost nobody uses it. Most people think about success by asking what they should do to get rich. Wrong question. The right question is, what would guarantee staying poor forever? And how can those things be avoided? What guarantees financial failure? The answers are obvious once listed. Spending more than earned is guaranteed failure. Saving nothing is guaranteed failure. Carrying high-interest debt is guaranteed failure. Being unreliable ensures nobody wants to work with someone or promote them. Feeling sorry for yourself makes people passive when they need to be active. Acting on envy makes them take stupid risks. Overtrading destroys compounding. Once someone has identified behaviors that guarantee failure, the strategy becomes simple. Don't do those things. Remarkable long-term advantage comes from trying to be consistently not stupid instead of trying to be very intelligent. Everyone is trying to be smart. Druckenmiller just tries not to be idiotic, but that's harder than it sounds. A principle that seems obvious but gets universally ignored deserves emphasis. Spend less than earned. Always be saving something. Over time, it will amount to something. This is such a no-brainer. Spend less than made. Invest intelligently. Avoid toxic people and activities. Keep learning continuously. Do massive amounts of delayed gratification. Doing all that makes reaching $25,000 almost inevitable. Not doing it means needing tremendous luck. After that 2000 tech disaster, Druckenmiller didn't just need to recover capital. He needed to recover his entire approach. So he went back to fundamentals. He studied his mistakes ruthlessly. He wrote down every principle he violated. He rebuilt his system to prevent those errors. Within 2 years, the fund had recovered. Within 5 years, they had exceeded previous performance. But the growth didn't happen because he got smarter. It happened because he returned to his system and followed it. The same applies to personal wealth. Getting to $25,000 requires a system, not motivation. Here's the system that works. First, automate everything. Savings, transfer the day you get paid before you can spend it. Second, track every dollar ruthlessly. You can't manage what you don't measure. Third, increase income through skill development. Nobody stays stuck at their current salary unless they stop learning. Fourth, cut wasteful spending without reducing quality of life. Fifth, review monthly, not daily, monthly. Daily checking leads to panic and bad decisions. This system has run successful wealth builders' lives for decades. It's boring, it's not exciting, but it works. Discipline beats motivation every time because motivation is temporary, but discipline is permanent. Something about leverage needs absolute clarity because this is where smart people destroy themselves right before crossing $25,000. Druckenmiller has watched it happen hundreds of times. Someone accumulates maybe $12,000 or $18,000, then gets impatient. They borrow money to invest. For a while it works beautifully because leverage magnifies gains. Then something goes wrong. The market drops. Suddenly leverage is magnifying losses. Everything disappears. At Duquesne, they were aggressive with position sizing, but careful about excessive leverage. That's not cowardice. It's arithmetic. You only need to get rich once. The beauty of building wealth without leverage is that nobody can take it away. Getting to $25,000 without debt means it's yours permanently. Earning power deserves discussion because saving is only half the equation. The safest way to get what you want is to deserve what you want. Earning more requires becoming more valuable, developing skills people will pay for, becoming reliable, knowledgeable, capable. Learning must continue forever. People who rise in life aren't necessarily the smartest. They're learning machines who go to bed slightly wiser than when they woke up. Over decades, that compounds into everything. Druckenmiller has never met a wise person who didn't read constantly. None. Zero. If someone is sitting with a modest salary thinking they're stuck, understand this. Salary today is not salary forever, but it will be if learning stops. Continuing education increases earning power. As earning power increases, savings capacity increases. As savings increase, compounding takes over. Let me tell you about 1992 in detail, because it illustrates everything. Druckenmiller and George Soros identified that the British pound was overvalued and couldn't maintain its peg to the Deutsche Mark. Britain's economy was weak, needed lower interest rates. Germany's was booming, needed higher rates. These currencies couldn't be linked. Druckenmiller started with a modest short position. Then the head of Germany's Bundesbank publicly questioned the peg's viability. That was the signal. He went to Soros and said they should double the position. Soros looked at him and said something that changed everything. Double? That's not enough. Go much bigger. So they did. They bet $10 billion against the pound. $10 billion. When the peg broke, the pound collapsed 15% overnight. The quantum fund made over $1 billion a single day. The Bank of England lost billions trying to defend the currency. They couldn't. The math was against them. But here's the lesson. Druckenmiller couldn't have executed that trade with $5,000 in capital, or even $25,000. But the point is this, having crossed the capital threshold years earlier, meant he was in position to recognize and execute when the opportunity appeared. Capital attracts opportunity. No capital means no opportunities, no matter how smart someone is. Here's something Druckenmiller learned from Soros that changed everything. When you have high conviction and the facts are on your side, bet big, really big. Most people make the mistake of betting small when they're right and doubling down when they're wrong. Do the opposite when certain and the risk-reward is asymmetric. Don't be timid. Load the boat. But here's the critical part most people miss. You can only bet big when you have capital. With $5,000, nobody can take advantage of asymmetric opportunities. With $25,000, they can start. With $100,000, they can really participate. This is why the threshold matters so much. It's not just about having money. It's about having enough capital to act when high conviction opportunities appear. Capital attracts opportunity. Opportunity generates more capital. The wealthy get wealthier. not because the system is rigged, but because having money enables making more money. The job is to accumulate enough capital to enter that cycle. $25,000 is where it begins. Patience is where most fail. The big money is not in buying or selling, it's in the waiting. Most people can't wait because they need to feel active. Constantly buying and selling means paying fees and taxes, interrupting the compounding that would make them wealthy if they just sat still. Here's critical information about where we are now in 2026. We're at the end of a massive debt cycle. Druckenmiller has studied these cycles for 4 decades. They don't end quietly. Total debt exceeds $90 trillion. Government debt is $35 trillion. When interest payments surpass defense spending, you're in the end stage. When debt cycles end, 3 things happen: defaults, restructuring, or inflation. Every single time across 500 years of history, in every case, people with capital survive and prosper. People without capital get destroyed. Reaching $25,000 before the crisis hits means being a buyer when everyone else must sell. Acquiring assets at distressed prices becomes possible. Waiting out chaos becomes an option. Exploiting the crisis instead of becoming its victim becomes reality. This isn't optional. This is survival. The window is closing. We're 12 to 24 months from the next major deleveraging. If someone doesn't have $25,000 by then, they'll be a casualty. The point of wealth isn't accumulating possessions. It's freedom, making your own choices without needing permission. Being broke means accepting whatever job you can get. Having $25,000 changes everything. Saying no becomes possible. Waiting for the right opportunity becomes viable. The entire relationship with life shifts. What not to do matters as much as what to do. Don't start spending more the moment you cross $25,000. People who build lasting wealth keep expenses flat, even as savings grow. Every dollar not spent is a dollar that compounds. Don't buy complex financial products. The industry profits from complexity. You profit from simplicity. Don't check investments daily. The more someone looks, the more likely they'll do something stupid. Don't try timing the market. Find good investments and hold them. If someone takes one message from everything here, it's this: spend less than earned, work hard, keep learning, be reliable, be patient. Avoid debt, avoid envy, avoid overtrading, stay within competence. Don't do stupid things. None of this is complicated. All of it is difficult. The difficulty isn't understanding what to do. It's actually doing it day after day, year after year, when progress is slow and temptations are constant. The first $25,000 will be hard. Questions about whether it's worth it will arise. Temptations to spend will appear. Others who seem more successful will be everywhere. Ignore all of it. Stay the course. Because once someone crosses $25,000, everything shifts. They have proof they can execute. Their money earns enough that they can see it. Scarcity psychology lifts. Then the push toward $50,000. Money contributes meaningfully. Then $125,000. Money works almost as hard as they do. Beyond that, the curve steepens dramatically. Freedom waits. But none of it happens without surviving the flat part. None of it happens without crossing that $25,000 threshold. Understanding both the power of compound interest and the difficulty of obtaining it is everything. Now, the information is clear. The question is what happens next. Most people will do nothing. They'll read